If every man was sexually disciplined and intentionally dated, how would women behave? If every man was sexually disciplined and intentionally dated, how would women behave?
I think that the conversation that so many women aren't listening or aren't following would be obsolete, because at that point, if this man is intentional and this man is if his intentions are clear and this woman has different options as far as with what's being presented, I think everything will be completely different. I think the entire environment would change. But I think that with us giving into the flesh, as the title says, the flesh is weak. When men show a lack of discipline, and I think that that's the point that Darwin was trying to make with the video, is the fact that we that day the panel looked undisciplined. So it's difficult for it's difficult for someone to decipher who to listen to in this moment, because you'll have the heathens that'll go one way, and then the ones that wish to be righteous to go the other. Now, I'm not here to say which side is more righteous and which side isn't, right? That's all on you. But at the same time, I think that if we all come to an understanding and an agreement at the baseline, and that's what leadership is, right? If we're going into gang politics, and I keep going to the streets because that might be more relatable. If the GDs on this side and the solid foes on this side, and we know that we know that we beefing, right? We're gonna come to this table and we're gonna come to an agreement. And that goes with leadership all throughout the world. So I think that the problem was that we couldn't come to an understanding, and that created everything.
Yeah, I most definitely
So,
think that. If
go
go
ahead.
ahead, Hank. My bad.
No, go ahead, but I don't get called a bully. So go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say that if every man was sexually disciplined and intentionally dating, how would women behave? I most definitely think women would fall in line, and I think they would behave like wives. At that point, if basically we're asking men if they was unwavering to the era, to the times, to society, on how it changes, if we would still remain unwavering in our principles, the women would have no choice but to fall in line. They would have no choice. We wouldn't have this issue. So, and it just sheds light on the fact that we did the complete opposite, which is why our women are out here out of order. How can they get in order when there's no man to get behind? They can't get in order. So I think we got to understand that. And I think in everything you do, you play basketball, you play sports, you go to work, there's always some type of order. There's always some unified standard. We're okay with buying into that. But when it comes to our relationships, our family, the very nucleus of the community, we can't get on the same standard with that. We find it a problem. We find it problematic. I don't get it. Like, I think Hank made a statement earlier talking about you got to have the experience or something, or in everything you do, you go and get experience. And so to justify, you should go do the same as far as relationships. But whenever you draw the parallel as work experience and then relationship experience, I think what you're doing is you're trying to have sexual experience with multiple people, but you can't, it doesn't really correlate with work experience. Work experience, you found a profession and you stuck with it. So the equivalent of relationship or the experience with women to work experience would be finding a wife. in having a long committed relationship and having experience. So I think the teaching should come from your parents to give you the programming or the guidelines on how to operate. You don't necessarily got to go out here and fail over and over, especially when elders or people before you have already went through the obstacles and all of the traps for you. So most definitely women will get in line. I think when we look at women, we don't think they have the capacity to stand behind us if we don't waver. In every generation throughout history, anytime we always stood on business, our women stood behind us. Yeah, you're gonna have a few outliers. For the most part, women stood behind the man. And if they didn't have, just think of it like this. If we don't go out here and indulge, who are they going to indulge with? Who?
All right. Can I jump in there, or are you still going?
I mean, that was a question, but you can go ahead and just jump in.
So I want to ask the question: did men change their sexual discipline, or did women? Right? It's my body, my choice now. There's all these different forms of birth control where they feel like they can go ahead and throw it around. They don't put the value on it, which once was, right? So now, is it the men's discipline that has changed, or will we all take it wherever we can get it?
It's the men's discipline.
The men's discipline changed, even though women now have the ability to have sex frivolously. Remember,
how can they have sex frivolously unless
listen?
Wait, hold on, Dar.
They can have sex frivolously because of things like birth control, because of things of like my body, my choice, things like that. So that gives them the ability to not have that same value on themselves. They're not holding it till marriage anymore. They're doing what they want at this point, right? So there is a different playing field. It's more readily available. What we say, the price, listen, the price of it has dropped. It used to be worth more. It used to be more expensive. Now, if it's only $40, how you gonna keep telling your son don't get none? It's cheap. They giving it away. You used to have to work for it,
and sometimes it's free.
So, Law, are you saying that we should be having sex with prostitutes? I mean, because that's what it sounds like.
No, it's not. No.
Hear me out.
What are the actual words I said?
No, hear me out. So if you just said that women, they're frivolous with their bodies, they're giving it out for $40. Who was doing that before? It was prostitutes, right?
And it's
so
no longer
us as king. You say what?
And it's no longer prostitutes. The value is not the same. Just like we talked about earlier, like I said last week, you're missing the point, right?
You're missing the point, though, bro. So if a woman doesn't value herself, if she's treating her body as if a prostitute would, why are we telling men to have sex with those prostitutes then? Right?
Who's telling men to do that?
Whose fault?
When did I say that?
I'm saying, hear me out. If you just said that women are giving away their bodies is cheap, right? That co-aligns with prostitutes. Will you, as a man, let's say hypothetically you weren't married, would you have sex with a prostitute?
No, but that's not the argument, brother.
Here's the argument.
Here's the argument.
Here's the argument.
It's the value of it, right?
Let me just ask you this, Law.
I'm addressing the value of it. If we're saying, if you just said that women, again, women. You said that women no longer value themselves and it's cheap and anybody can get it. That's what a prostitute is. If anybody can get it for some money, that's a prostitute.
So let me ask you this, Law.
He wasn't saying for real money. He was just saying that they don't really care about who they give it to.
They sell themselves for meals. They sell themselves for gifts. They sell themselves for attention. So it depends on who you ask. They've already been prostitute. Let me say this. Most men ain't having sex. So that's why I'm trying to figure out, what are y'all talking about all these men having sex? Most men ain't getting no ass. It's a small percentage of men who are getting ass on a regular basis who are not married. And do you have some men who are married are not getting goddamn ass? Why are we acting like this ain't happening?
What does that have to do
We
with the
think, oh,
person?
everybody else, they just out here just fucking everything. No, it's not the case.
What does that have to do with the person?
Even in the 60s, we talking about leadership. Please stop interrupting me. I don't interrupt nobody else. Please stop interrupting me. So we talk about in the 60s, a sexual liberation. Ladies, they want to be sexually liberated. They want to be able to do what they want to do. What does that got to do with it? How you gonna blame the men on that too? What does that got to do with the men? That's what they wanted. They wanted to be free. They wanted to do anything. And y'all ask, what would they do if they wasn't messing on the men? Let me say this right now. These women are fluent. I already think most of these women are bisexual any goddamn way. They could get away with touching on each other's ass. They could be getting away with dancing each other in the club, touching on each other's breasts, saying certain innuendos to each other. They already do it. So I wouldn't be surprised if men start getting the discipline that y'all talking about. They will start licking each other. They doing it now, and it's okay. You okay with your daughter being a bull dagger? Y'all okay with that shit? I ain't for it. Fuck that shit. But some of y'all with it.
So are you suggesting that because men practice discipline and operate on a moral code, that women are going to go out there and screw each other, when nowhere in history has that ever been a thing where women in mass? Hold on, wait a minute. Bro. Now y'all just told me not to cut nobody off, and then you jump in. Notice how that works.
It's because you've been doing it all night.
I don't care. The point is, nowhere in history has that ever been a thing. You can't point to no point in history where men practice discipline and the women said, well, these dudes don't want to sleep with us. Let's go sleep with the other women. That is not a thing. Y'all keep talking about. The funny thing is that I've heard on these panels several times is that, man, you got to be able to lead the woman. If she's not willing to acquiesce to you, then you need to kick that chick down the road. But then when we talk about things that when we say, well, men should operate in this way, and if the woman doesn't operate in that way, now y'all saying, well, what happens if they sleep with somebody else? It doesn't make any sense. The point, and then I would like to read this. Men further accentuated their power, but then freedom offered in the youth culture liberated them to abuse that power beyond mere use of language and actual relations with women. What was to stop them? The reduction of the power of sanctions left men to their own vagaries and moods. As the barriers and control around male sexuality broke down, so men behaved in more sexually expressive and impulsive ways, the dating system gave encouragement for them to behave so. Increasingly, as earlier among the lower classes, men come to expect that money they spent on dates entitled them to thrills. Now, this is back in the 1920s, so thrills was basically back in the 1920s, it was getting kisses or they called it petting, but basically men groping on a girl like when they went on a date. So men would expect thrills in return, and they were affronted when women would not grant them these desires. One guy, Frank, complained that he gave a girl a good time, but when I asked for a kiss, she refused. Don't I deserve at least one? $15, it was becoming more difficult for women not to pet. Petting, again, is when women let men touch on them and stuff like that, like, you know what I mean, fill them up. It became more difficult for women not to pet if they would rather not. Doris Blake in 1926 presented what she called a typical letter from a girl and her friend who declared, "We are not petters. So far we have upheld our views, but we are becoming desperate. Every young man we have met so far we have found to be inclined towards petting." Let me explain what that means. What that means is that a lot of women, when they saw the men who acquiesced to the hoes, acquiesced to their sexual desires, the women who were good women started to actually acquiesce to the men because they felt like if the hoes are getting the attention, if they're getting this, then the men turn around and expect it from us. If we want these men, we have to acquiesce to them and give it to them. And then what also started to happen was that during that period of time, men, and they even admitted that the lines between good women and bad women started to blur. They began to start calling these women, let me see, what did they call them?
You read the whole book.
Our man began nowhere is more clear than in the use of language. Among the 19th century, middle-class men talked of middle-class women with the utmost respect and deference. It was simply not respectable to do otherwise. But as middle-class women began to become more sexually available, men began to speak of them in ways they previously talked only of the working class women and prostitutes. In other words, what they began to do was they started looking at the regular women and started looking at them like they were prostitutes and started talking to them like they were prostitutes. So what we're seeing today is that when we're seeing the same exact thing today. You look at the red pill space. What do they look at all women as? Hoes, prostitutes. They all trying to give it up. They all they don't want anything but your money. They're all degenerate. And we're contributing to that because in history, we watched it repeat itself in 1920. We saw this happen before.
So does that tell you? So does that tell you that it just started then, or is that just human nature? What do you?
No, it's got nothing to do.
No. The point is the point. If you want me to answer, the point is that I'm going to explain to you. The point is that normally every time you see a breakdown in sexual behavior between men and women, you start to see the breakdown in society. Now, here's the thing. I would grant you this. If you're saying that you're completely okay with this and this is just human nature, then there's no reason for this space to exist for us to complain about how women are behaving because we're okay with the outcomes because we're literally contributing to them. Unless you're saying that you're okay with the outcomes, then you can't sit here and make the argument that, okay, well, we're all human.
Bro, that's human nature, what you just spoke about, bro. If we're in the neighborhood and I have a car and my car has 22-inch rims and my girl is fine, and you're looking at that me like, damn, I mean, we don't look that different, but he do got that car on 22-inch rims. You're gonna do whatever it takes for you to get that car on 22-inch rims because you believe that gets this type of girl. It's human nature, bro. It's competition. Like, have you ever
I get that. I get that we're dealing with human nature, right? However, there's a reason why.
Let him finish, bro.
Right. I was just gonna say that there was a reason why people had to come in and keep people in check. There's a reason for that. It's because it yielded the best results. Anytime you let human nature just run its course, it goes awry. That's why for the largest part of history, many people followed some form of religion or some form of doctrine or some form of code. Because if you let people move however they want to, you tend to see society break down. They didn't just hold women to a certain standard. They also held men to the same sexual standards because these were mostly religious people.
Yep.
Bro, the world wasn't always religious. A lot of our West African ancestors had multiple wives.
It always was religious. And you got to understand what.
No, it wasn't, bro. I have homies right now from West Africa that's like, wow, my dad just died in Nigeria, and we're in a dispute between him and his 4 wives, which is where the majority. Huh?
They may not have been Christians, but in every country there is a religion that they hold themselves to. Everyone
just because it's not the same.
That has nothing to do with the sexual standards that he tried to put on the table. Divorces over here are 70%. We are non-traditional. We are non-traditional marriage-wise. At least 59% of people cohabitate. So I'm not understanding. People have been selling pussy from the beginning of time. Roman Empire was the greatest empire, and they were the most influx with
that wasn't the beginning of time
and homosexuality. That's one of the greatest empires in the world. So I'm trying to figure out,
because it was the greatest doesn't make it the first empire.
Okay.
Let him finish.
Here's the thing. You're a novice at the Bible, and you like thumping it. And I keep telling you that you have to be very careful as you go through your journey, Darwin. And then you place judgment on people. You said from your own mouth when I first came on the show that you was out there getting pussy left and right, homie. And then you got an epiphany and a moral compass within a short period of time where you're now putting a strap to people and telling them how they should live their lives rather than slowly consuming that book and learning it properly before you start lashing down thunder and lightning on people. Sir, I think you need to slow down. You dress well. But that book is something very powerful. It can make people revel or riot. And I don't think it should be in your hands to belittle or demean people for not living the way you live. And I've given you credit for building a nuclear home, finding a good woman, and raising children. You have to be very careful. That's why you have people in an uproar. Let me pull back.
So the credit you give me for being married for a decade and doing it the right way, it's worthless when you go and pinpoint the misbehavior that I went through when I was in my teens and early 20s. It doesn't even hold any merit. If you can in one hand give me my flowers for doing it right for a decade, but then try to judge me from a change I made in my life. So one thing you got to understand about being a leader and growth. Most leaders who grew, they grew from a behavior that was unacceptable. Someone brought it to their light. Someone brought it to light, and then they digested it, and it was like, okay, this maybe this is not the right way. How about we do this way? Now that I know better, I do better.
I get
so
that
I don't
part,
understand why you want to hold me accountable from the ways I used to be instead of for who I am today.
Because that's not part of your testimony. That's not part of your testimony.
It is part of my testimony.
When I come up on the show,
how do you think you know? How do you think you know that information if it's not a part of my testimony?
Hold on, it was pulled out of you. Your ego made you say it.
Never was.
Hear me out. Your ego made you say it when you told me you were 6'4", handsome, and how many escapades you had. You remember when you was trying to school me, talking about staying in my place? I'm good at remembering these things. You didn't willfully give it to me. Hold
on. Wait. So you're not wrong. I did tell you that. But what context was I speaking from?
Braggadocious. You were speaking braggadociously because I didn't measure up to you, and you were trying to show me that.
My wife listens to this show every time I get on. She never witnessed me brag about some pussy I had before.
Let me finish. There's been times when you spoke braggadociously, like you were trying to put me into the place like I don't measure up to you, 6'4", light skin, nuclear family, this, that. You even said you envy me because I had the nuclear family and you didn't. But here's your testimony. You're throwing judgment on people. I don't hear you saying, you know what? Here's my transition. You did it to show ego to me. You didn't tell your story, so why it's more consumable to people. Oh, he's showing that this is his growth and how he matured. You're just coming in full steam. You shouldn't be doing this. Take a lash for that. The Bible should be thrown in your face for that. That's exactly what you're doing. Most people, if they want to hear your story, okay, so what's your testimony? You perfect? But I know different. Nobody wants to consume that. Ears get closed when you come at people like that. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, that's fine. You can close your ears. You can close your ears, or you could address me about an issue that we had on the panel off platform. But I think it's important for us to address the topics today. So I like how you try to.
That's what I did. That's part of leadership. That's part of what we're talking about. Accountability.
Well, okay. So how does what you're talking about discount anything I say about leadership? Because of somebody I was in the past.
You missed.
If that's the case, if what your logic is basically you're saying nobody can be a pastor. Nobody could be no father can teach his kid the right way. No recovering drug addict can walk into a narcotics anonymous class and talk to a bunch of brothers in a jail cell and say, hey, look, this is not what you want to do. This is what I've been through. With your logic, you're saying that nobody can go through the trenches, go through travesties, experience hardship in life, and come back and report that there's a better way to do things. With your logic.
All right.